My boss said women can't lead. I bought the company and made his wife the new VP over him now. The microphone made that awful squeal when I tapped it, and the entire conference room flinched like one organism. 40-something employees, folding chairs, cheap pastries going stale on paper plates, and Derek sitting in the front row with his arms crossed like he was daring me to waste his time. He'd worn his big meeting blazer, navy, shiny elbows, and he was smirking before I even opened my mouth. Beside him, Elena sat very still with a folder on her lap, her posture so controlled it was almost painful to watch. My hands were sweating around my own notes. I could feel the paper softening at the edges. I took one breath, then another, and said, "Good morning, everyone. I'm going to keep this straightforward because I know this is a lot." Derek leaned back in his chair and stage whispered something to the guy next to him. I caught a few words, little speech, cute. And my stomach did that cold drop it does right before a roller coaster. I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on the middle distance, the way you do when you're trying not to make a decision you can't undo. As of 8 a.m. this morning, I said, voice steadier than my body felt. The company has new ownership. The deal closed last night. I'm a majority owner, and I'll be stepping into the CEO role effective immediately. There was a beat where nobody breathed. Someone's chair creaked. Somewhere near the back, a person whispered, "Wait." And then the whisper spread like a ripple. Derek's smirk didn't disappear right away. It froze, like his face couldn't decide whether to keep performing confidence or admit to surprise. He gave a short laugh that sounded wrong in the silence. "That's funny," he said, loud enough for people to turn. "Okay, who's actually in charge here?" I finally looked at him. My heart was beating so hard I could see my pulse in my throat. "I am," I said. Then I turned slightly and nodded toward Elena. "And as part of the new structure, Elena Klein will be our VP of Operations and Finance. Derek, your role will now report into her." The room didn't explode the way you'd expect. It went quiet in a more serious way, like everyone was trying to read whether this was real life or some bizarre corporate prank. Derek's eyes flicked to Elena, then back to me. His mouth opened, closed, opened again, and the color in his face climbed like someone was turning a dial. Elena didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply opened her folder, pulled out a printed org chart, and placed it on the table in front of her with a slow, deliberate movement. The paper made a soft slap against the wood, the kind of sound you only hear when the room is holding its breath. Derek stared at it like it was written in another language. His hands, the same hands that used to gesture dramatically while he told people women can't lead, were suddenly flat on his knees, fingers curled. It was a Tuesday night almost a year earlier when Derek said the line that kicked off everything. Though if I'm honest, he'd been saying versions of it the entire time I'd worked under him. We were at a client dinner, one of those team-building things that's actually just executives drinking and pretending it's bonding. Derek had ordered a second round and got loud, as Derek does when he senses an audience. He'd been talking about a competitor company that had just appointed a female CEO. One of the younger account managers, said, "That's awesome. She must be smart as hell." Derek laughed into his glass and said, "Smart doesn't matter if you can't lead. Women can't lead. They get emotional, they hesitate, they want consensus. You need a backbone for this industry." I remember the exact sensation in my body when he said it. Not just anger, something tighter, almost like shame, because I felt the whole table pivot in microscopic ways. People avoided my eyes. A couple of men laughed politely. A woman from our marketing team stared down at her plate like it had suddenly become fascinating. And me? I sat there, lips pressed together, because I knew the trap. If I challenged him, I'd be emotional. If I stayed quiet, I'd be complicit. I said interesting in a tone so flat it barely sounded like a word. Derek turned his head toward me with that lazy grin. "No offense," he added, like that absolves anything. "You're great at what you do. You keep things running. That's valuable. But leadership is different." He'd said it like he was giving me a compliment, like he was placing me neatly into a box labeled useful, not threatening. And I smiled because my brain did what it always did around Derek. Chose survival over satisfaction. Here's what people need to understand about Derek. He's not the cartoon villain who walks around announcing his sexism like it's a hobby. He's worse. He packages it as just being realistic. He says things with a chuckle, then acts shocked if you react. He builds plausible deniability into every insult. When you're a woman working under someone like that, you end up doing a constant mental cost-benefit analysis. Is this comment worth fighting today? Do I have the energy? Do I want to be labeled difficult in a company where difficult means you stop getting invited into rooms where decisions are made? I started at this company 8 years ago as an operations analyst. It was a mid-sized logistics business, nothing glamorous, family-owned, steady contracts, decent people. I was fresh off a messy breakup, living in a tiny apartment, trying to prove to myself I could build something stable. I worked hard, and I was good. I became the person people came to when shipments were missing, when the warehouse was behind, when the software crashed, when a client was screaming. I didn't have the loudest personality, so I became the one with solutions. Derek came in a year later as a sales manager and climbed fast because he has that specific kind of confidence people mistake for competence. He was charming to clients, he could talk himself out of anything, and he was very good at taking credit without leaving fingerprints. He learned early that if you make the owner feel important and the staff feel slightly afraid, you can float for a long time. The first time Derek undermined me directly was in a meeting about a warehouse overhaul I'd planned. I'd built timelines, cost savings, safety improvements, all of it. I presented it, and halfway through Derek cut in and said, "Let's not get lost in details. We need a strong decision, not a spreadsheet." Then he turned to the owner and said, "Here's what I think we should do," and repeated my plan like it had appeared in his brain fully formed. Afterward, I confronted him in the hallway. Not dramatically, just, "Hey, I put that together. Please don't present it as yours." Derek smiled like I was adorable. "Relax," he said. "We're on the same team. And honestly, you should be happy I can sell your ideas. That's leadership. That's the kind of person he is. He believes his ability to talk is more important than your ability to build." Over the years, Derek's comments got bolder in private and sneakier in public. He'd call women high maintenance if they asked for resources. He'd say a female supervisor was moody if she enforced safety rules. He'd say things like, "You're not like other women," as if that was praise. He'd also, this is important, kept a careful hold on the narrative that the company's success was because of his vision, while the actual machinery of the business was held together by people he dismissed as support. Elena, his wife, was one of those people. Elena wasn't always in the company. She joined 4 years ago when our old finance director retired, and suddenly we needed someone who could clean up our systems before the owner's planned retirement. Elena came in as controller, then became de facto CFO without the title. She was quiet, sharp, and terrifyingly competent in a way that didn't need applause. She didn't socialize. She didn't play office politics. She just fixed things. And Derek? Derek treated Elena like an accessory at work the same way he treated her socially, like her competence was something that reflected on him. He'd introduce her to clients as my better half, then interrupt her if she started answering a question. He'd tell people she handles the numbers because she loves details, like she was doing Sudoku for fun, not managing the company's financial reality. Elena and I weren't friends at first. She was guarded, and I don't blame her. When your husband is Derek, you learn to move carefully. But we worked together more and more, me on ops, her on finance. And over time, we started sharing the kind of small looks people share when they're both aware of the same problem and try not to say it too loudly. Then the company hit a rough patch. The owner, Mr. Carlisle, was in his late 60s and tired. He'd been hinting for a while that he wanted to sell. Derek heard sell and immediately started acting like he'd already inherited the throne. He dropped lines like, "When Carlisle steps back, we're going to modernize, and I'll be making some changes around here soon," like he was already CEO. Meanwhile, the numbers were not great. We weren't failing, but we weren't growing, and Derek had made a few bold sales moves that were basically expensive mistakes. Discounted contracts that looked good on paper but drained margin. promises to clients that ops had to scramble to fulfill, a new vendor relationship that turned into a headache. Whenever things got tight, Derek would blame operations for being slow and risk-averse. I was tired of being blamed for the consequences of his ego. After the dinner where he said women can't lead, I went home and sat on my kitchen floor for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't rage text Jenna, my best friend, like I normally would. I just sat there and stared at my hands like they belonged to someone else. Because Derek hadn't just insulted me. He'd given voice to the quiet rule he'd been enforcing all along. Women exist to support, not to steer. The next day, I started collecting receipts. Not in a cartoonish revenge binder way. In a calm, adult, I am not getting gaslit way. Emails where Derek took credit. Messages where he called female managers emotional. Meeting notes where he dismissed safety concerns until a male supervisor repeated them. I also started watching the company's situation more closely. If Carlisle wanted to sell, Derek was going to position himself as the natural successor. And I couldn't stomach the idea of working another decade under a man who believed I should never outrank him because of my gender. I had something Derek didn't: relationships and credibility in the parts of the business that actually mattered. Clients trusted me because I fixed their problems. Warehouse staff trusted me because I didn't treat them like furniture. Carlisle trusted me because I was consistent, and I've been saving for years, quietly, boringly, because stability is my love language. The idea didn't arrive fully formed. It started as a whisper. What if I didn't have to ask permission anymore? Around that time, Carlisle asked me and Elena to join him for coffee. It wasn't dramatic, just a let's talk meeting in his small office with a worn leather chair. He looked tired. He rubbed his temple a lot. "I'm not getting any younger," he said. "I need an exit plan. I want someone who will take care of what I built." Derek, of course, had been campaigning for that role loudly. He'd been dropping by Carlisle's office with ideas, taking him to lunch, acting like a son. Carlisle didn't say Derek's name out loud, but the subtext was there. I don't fully trust him. I surprised myself by saying, if you want continuity, a management buyout makes sense. Carlisle blinked. "You mean you?" he asked, half amused, half curious. My mouth went dry. I looked at Elena, and she gave me the smallest nod, almost imperceptible, but it felt like a hand on my back. "I mean a group," I said carefully. "Without side capital. Structured. Responsible." Carlisle leaned back. "Could you do that?" I didn't say yes immediately. I didn't have to. I just said, "If you're open to it, I can explore options." When we left the office, Elena walked beside me in the hallway, without speaking for a minute. Then, very quietly, she said, "He'll try to take it from you." I didn't ask who he was. I already knew. That night, I called a former client who'd once mentioned he'd moved into private investing after selling his own business. We had coffee, then another, then a lawyer, then an accountant, then more coffee, more spreadsheets, more nights staring at numbers until my eyes felt like sandpaper. The process wasn't glamorous. It was paperwork, risk, negotiation, and the constant fear that I was being ridiculous. I didn't tell Derek. I didn't even tell most people. The fewer mouths, the fewer leaks. Elena helped in her own quiet way. She never said, "I'm in." She never said, "I hate my husband." She just made sure the financials were clean, the projections were honest, the liabilities were visible. And sometimes, late in the office, she'd pause beside my desk and say something small like, "Don't let him rush you." And it felt like solidarity without a flag. Derek sent something anyway, because Derek can smell control slipping like smoke. He started making comments. "You've been busy lately. You seem stressed. Don't forget who you work for." He started excluding me from meetings. He tried to reassign one of my team members to him temporarily, like he was testing how much he could strip away. Then he did what men like Derek always do when they're threatened. He tried to undermine my credibility with Carlisle. I found out because Carlisle called me and said, "Derek came by. He's worried you're overextending and that you'll tank the company trying to play entrepreneur." I remember gripping my phone so hard my hand cramped. "Did he say that?" I asked, voice steady even though my lungs felt tight. Carlyle sighed. He did. Do you believe him? I asked. There was a pause. Then Carlyle said no. But I don't like the drama. I don't either, I said. And it was true. I wasn't doing this to win. I was doing it to breathe. A few weeks later, Derek cornered me in the break room. He'd waited until it was just us, which is how cowards operate. Heard you've been talking to Carlyle, he said, too casual. I kept pouring coffee like my hand wasn't trembling. We all talked to Carlyle, I said. Derek leaned in, voice lower. Don't get ideas, he said. This isn't your lane. I finally looked at him. What's my lane? I asked. He smiled slow. You're great at support, he said. Systems. People. But leadership? That's not. He gestured vaguely, like my body itself was the problem. It's not what you're built for. Something in me went very quiet. Good to know, I said, and walked out before he could see how much it hit. 2 months after that, the offer went in. It wasn't just me writing a check like a movie. It was investors, a structure, me putting in my own money, and a plan Carlyle could trust. It was also Carlyle choosing me because he wanted his legacy protected, not because I'd won some contest. Derek wasn't even in the room when the final decision was made. Carlyle called him afterward, and Derek apparently lost his mind. There were rumors of shouting. There were slammed doors. I heard, through a warehouse supervisor who heard it through a receptionist, that Derek said, "You can't let a woman run this place." Like that argument would suddenly become persuasive. Closing took time. Lawyers, documents, the kind of stress that makes your jaw ache in your sleep. I didn't eat properly for weeks. I kept thinking, what if I'm doing all this and I fail? Not because Derek would be right, because failure is terrifying when people are counting on you. And throughout all of it, Elena stayed steady. Too steady sometimes, like she practiced being calm in a storm her whole life. The night before closing, I got a message from Elena. Tomorrow morning, 7:30. Conference room. I'll be there. That was all. Then, the morning of the meeting, the one you walked in on at the start of this story, I watched Derek's face crumble in real time while Elena sat like a woman finally allowed to exist in full. After I announced the new structure, Derek tried to laugh it off. He stood up, loud, gesturing like he could turn the room with sheer energy. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You can't just, you buy a company and play dress-up CEO? You don't have the backbone for it." There were a few nervous chuckles. Habit is powerful. Derek had trained people to laugh along. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult him. I simply said, "Derek, sit down." He blinked, like he couldn't process being spoken to that way. "Elena," I added, turning slightly, "do you want to walk everyone through the reporting changes?" Elena stood. Smooth, controlled. "Yes," she said. And then she did something that made my stomach twist with both admiration and sadness. She spoke with clarity and authority, without a single glance at Derek. She didn't ask permission. She didn't soften her words. She outlined expectations like a person who'd already been doing the job, just without the title. Derek interrupted twice. The first time Elena said, "You'll have a chance to ask questions at the end." The second time she said, "Derek, this isn't a debate." Her voice wasn't cruel. It was final. I watched Derek's eyes flick to her, like he was seeing his wife as a separate person for the first time. Not his wife, a leader. That's when it hit me how complicated this was. Because yes, there was satisfaction in watching Derek finally collide with consequences. But there was also a horrible tenderness in realizing Elena had probably been living under his thumb for years, and this moment wasn't just corporate, it was personal. After the meeting, Derek stormed into my office. He didn't knock. He never knocks. He shut the door hard enough the glass rattled in the frame. "You did this to humiliate me," he hissed. I sat down slowly, forcing my body to stay calm, even though my hands wanted to shake. "I did this to run a company," I said. "Your humiliation is not my business objective." "You put my wife over me," he spat. "She earned the title," I said. "She's been holding this place together financially for years." Derek's face twisted. "She's my wife." I stared at him. "That's not a qualification," I said. "And it's not a leash." He stepped closer, voice dropping into that threatening softness. "You think people will follow you?" he said. "You think you can lead men?" There was again the same poison. The same belief. I leaned back in my chair, and I felt something settle in my chest. Solid, almost peaceful. They don't have to follow me because I'm a woman, I said. They follow competence. They follow clarity. They follow someone who doesn't treat them like props. Derek scoffed. This won't last, he said. You'll mess up. You'll get emotional. I looked him straight in the eye. Derek, I said quietly, if you can't work under Elena, you can leave. Your contract will be reviewed, but your behavior will not continue. He stared at me like I'd spoken another language, then laughed, high and ugly. You can't fire me, he said. I didn't respond with a threat. I just opened a folder on my desk and slid it toward him. Inside were printed copies of policy violations HR had documented over the years, complaints that had been buried, comments that had been minimized, patterns that had been excused because he brought in revenue. Elena hadn't handed those to me because she wanted revenge. She handed them to me because she wanted protection. For herself. For everyone. Derek's smile died as he flipped pages. His throat bobbed. For the first time, he looked uncertain. You've been protected, I said, still quiet. Not because you deserved it. Because no one wanted the mess. I'm not afraid of the mess. Derek shoved the folder back like it burned. You're turning her against me, he snapped. And there it was, his favorite story. Women don't have agency. They're always being turned. I held his gaze. No, I said. You did that. He left my office without another word, and his footsteps down the hallway sounded heavier than usual. Elena didn't speak to me about their marriage. She didn't have to. But over the next few weeks, I noticed small things. Derek stopped coming in early. Elena stayed later. Derek's tone in meetings got sharper, then quieter. He tried to rally a couple of guys to his side, but it didn't land because people aren't as stupid as he thinks they are. They've been tolerating him, not adoring him. The funniest part, if you can call it funny, was watching the warehouse staff respond to Elena. They respected her, not because she was Derek's wife, because she was direct, fair, and didn't talk down to them. She'd walk the floor, ask questions, remember names. She'd say, I need this done, and people would do it because it made sense, not because she was performing dominance. 3 months in, Derek tried one last gambit. He sent a company-wide email criticizing a new scheduling system, calling it inefficient and overcomplicated, implying Elena and I were ruining the company. He CC'd people he thought would be impressed. He used phrases like strategic vision, like he was still auditioning for CEO. Elena replied, not to all, just to him and me, with a short message. Derek, if you have concerns, bring them to our weekly review. Do not undermine leadership via mass email again. This is your written warning. And that was it. No emotion, no apology, no drama. A boundary. A week later, Derek quit. He tried to frame it as, I'm not going to be disrespected, but everyone knew what it was. He couldn't handle reporting to a woman, especially his wife, the person he'd assumed would always remain in a supportive role. He couldn't handle the world not bending around his ego anymore. The day he cleared his desk, he didn't look at me. He didn't look at Elena either. He walked out like a man, convinced he was the victim of some conspiracy instead of the predictable result of his own beliefs. After he left, the office felt quieter. Not magically perfect, just less tense. Like people's shoulders dropped a fraction because they weren't bracing for his next comment. Elena came into my office that afternoon and closed the door softly. She stood there for a second, hands clasped, and for the first time since the takeover, she looked tired in a human way. I didn't want it to happen like this, she said, voice low. I nodded. I know, I said. She swallowed. But I'm glad it happened, she admitted, and her eyes shone for a second before she blinked it away. Thank you. I didn't say, you're welcome, like this was a favor. I said, you earned it because she did, and because I needed her to hear it from someone who wasn't trying to keep her small. Sometimes, late at night, I still replay Derek's voice from that dinner. Women can't lead. Not because I'm haunted by him, but because I'm haunted by how many people laugh along with men like that just to avoid discomfort. How many careers get quietly limited because someone decided leadership has a gender? Buying the company didn't make me fearless. It just made me responsible. There are nights I wake up thinking about payroll, about contracts, about whether I made the right call. There are mornings I stare at the calendar and feel my stomach knot because being in charge means the consequences land on you. But here's what I know. Leadership isn't a voice tone or a body type or a willingness to bulldoze. It's making decisions that hold weight. It's owning mistakes. It's taking care of people while also demanding standards. It's doing the unglamorous work even when nobody claps. Derek thought leadership was a costume men wore. He thought women existed to keep the lights on while men took the credit. Now the lights are on, the company is stable, and the people running it are the ones who actually know how it works. And every time someone asks me, half joking, "So did you really make his wife his boss?" I always have the same answer. I didn't make her anything. I stopped pretending she wasn't already leading.